Judge Judy was about to deliver the most savage 8-word response in courtroom history that would make an entitled Karen's profanity-laced tirade backfire so spectacularly, she'd be escorted out by security while the audience gave a standing ovation. Karen Roberts, a 42-year-old luxury car dealership manager who drove a BMW with vanity plates and wore designer suits like armor, walked into that courtroom believing she could intimidate America's toughest judge the same way she intimidated teenage car buyers. She had no idea that the curse word she was about to scream would become the most regretted moment of her entire life, captured on camera and shared 89 million times across every social media platform imaginable. What happened in the next 90 seconds didn't just end her case. It ended her career, her reputation, and her ability to ever show her face in public again without being recognized as the woman who cursed at Judge Judy on national television. But here's what makes this story absolutely insane. Karen didn't just curse. She didn't just lose her temper in a moment of frustration. What she did was so disrespectful, so outrageously entitled, that Judge Judy stood up from her bench, something she rarely does, and delivered a verbal destruction so complete that Karen was literally crying and begging for mercy within 60 seconds. The hashtag Karen Curses Out trended for 5 consecutive days as millions of people shared the clip with comments like "This is what happens when you disrespect Judge Judy," and finally, an entitled Karen gets what she deserves. Before we show you the exact moment when Karen's mouth destroyed her entire life, make sure you hit that like button if you're ready to see pure justice delivered to someone who thought she was above consequences. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss these explosive courtroom moments where entitled bullies finally meet someone who won't tolerate their behavior. Trust me, what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice. Now let me take you inside this case and show you exactly how an arrogant car dealer targeted a vulnerable college student and why Judge Judy was waiting to make an example out of her that would echo through television history. Tommy Chin had never been inside a courtroom before that Tuesday morning. The 19-year-old college student sat nervously in the plaintiff's chair, wearing a borrowed suit jacket that was slightly too big for his thin frame, clutching a folder full of documents he had carefully organized with the kind of attention to detail that came from desperation. Tommy was a first-generation college student whose parents had immigrated from Taiwan 15 years earlier and built a small family restaurant through nothing but brutal work and sacrifice. He had watched his mother work 16-hour days in that kitchen and his father handle deliveries until 2 in the morning, all so Tommy could have opportunities they never had. Tommy was studying nursing at the local community college, maintaining a 3.7 grade average while working 3 part-time jobs to afford tuition, books, and living expenses. Every dollar he earned mattered because his family's restaurant operated on razor-thin margins and couldn't help him financially. For 2 years, Tommy had been saving money with a single goal in mind. He needed a reliable car to get to his work shifts at the hospital where he was a nurse's aide, to his classes at the community college, and to his weekend job tutoring high school students in math. Public transportation added 3 hours to his daily commute, eating into study time and sleep that he desperately needed. So Tommy had been putting away every spare dollar, skipping social events, bringing lunch from home and working extra shifts whenever possible. After 24 months of sacrifice, he had saved $4,500 in cash, safely stored in a bank account that represented his independence and mobility. That money meant everything to him. It meant freedom from the exhausting bus routes. It meant being able to pick up extra shifts at the hospital. It meant having control over his schedule and his future. Tommy had researched used cars for months, reading consumer reports, watching videos about what to look for, and creating a checklist of reliable models that fit his budget. That's when he saw Karen Roberts' advertisement for a 2015 Honda Civic listed at $4,200. The ad described it as certified pre-owned, dealer-inspected, and clean title guaranteed. The photographs showed a decent-looking silver sedan that seemed perfect for Tommy's needs. Honda Civics were known for reliability, and the price fit perfectly within his budget, leaving him $300 for insurance and registration. Tommy called the dealership and spoke with Karen, who had a smooth, professional voice that immediately put him at ease. She told him the car was in excellent condition, had been thoroughly inspected by their certified mechanics, and was priced to sell quickly because they needed to make room for new inventory. Karen used every sales tactic in her arsenal to create urgency without Tommy realizing he was being manipulated. Karen told Tommy that several other buyers were interested in the vehicle and that if he wanted it, he should come in immediately with cash because financing would take too long and he'd likely lose the opportunity. Tommy felt the pressure mounting but also felt excited that he had finally found the perfect car within his budget. He withdrew his entire $4,500 in cash from the bank, his hands shaking slightly as the teller counted out the bills, representing 2 years of sacrifice and dreams of independence. When Tommy arrived at the dealership, Karen's demeanor was friendly and warm, greeting him with a professional smile and leading him to the silver Honda Civic parked prominently in the front lot. She walked him around the vehicle, pointing out features and emphasizing how well maintained it was, how the previous owner had been meticulous about service, and how lucky Tommy was that it was still available. When Tommy asked about getting a pre-purchase inspection from an independent mechanic, Karen's expression shifted subtly. She told him that wasn't necessary because the car had already been inspected by their certified technicians, and besides, the other interested buyer was coming back that afternoon with cash. If Tommy wanted the car, he needed to make a decision now. Tommy felt his stomach tighten with anxiety, but the pressure of potentially losing this opportunity after 2 years of saving overwhelmed his better judgment. Karen handed him a thick stack of paperwork, pointing to signature lines and flipping pages quickly while explaining that everything was standard dealer contract language. She moved through the documents so rapidly that Tommy barely had time to read anything, and when he tried to slow down to review a particular section, Karen would tap her pen impatiently and remind him that time was running short. Buried on page 14 of the contract in 8-point font under subsection C, was a clause that changed the entire nature of the sale. While the top of the contract and the advertisement both prominently stated clean title and dealer inspected, this hidden clause revealed that the vehicle was actually being sold as is with a salvage title due to previous flood damage. Tommy had no idea what a salvage title meant or why it mattered. He trusted that Karen, as a professional dealer, was being honest with him. He signed every document she placed in front of him, handed over his $4,500 in cash, and drove away in what he believed was a reliable certified pre-owned Honda Civic that would serve him well through college. 3 days later, Tommy was driving to his hospital shift when the transmission began making a horrible grinding noise, followed by the car losing all power and coasting to a stop on the side of the highway. He had the vehicle towed to a nearby mechanic, his heart pounding with anxiety about what might be wrong. The mechanic's diagnosis was devastating. The transmission was completely destroyed, and upon further inspection, there was evidence of extensive previous water damage throughout the vehicle. The mechanic explained that someone had done temporary repairs to mask the problems just long enough to sell the car, but the underlying damage was catastrophic and unfixable without replacing virtually every major component. The repair estimate came to $6,800, far more than the car was worth and more money than Tommy had in the world. The mechanic also showed Tommy how to check the title history and revealed that the vehicle had a salvage title due to flood damage from 2 years ago. Tommy felt his entire world collapsing as he realized he had been completely deceived. He immediately called Karen, his hands shaking as he explained what the mechanic had found and asked what they could do to resolve the situation. Karen's voice, so warm and friendly during the sale, turned ice cold. She told Tommy that all sales were final and that he should have read his contract more carefully before signing. When Tommy insisted that she had assured him the car was thoroughly inspected and had a clean title, Karen laughed and said that everything was disclosed in the paperwork and that his lack of attention to detail wasn't her problem. Tommy was in shock, unable to believe that someone could be so callous about destroying his financial stability. Over the next week, Tommy called the dealership 17 times, left 11 voicemails, and sent multiple emails trying to reach Karen and find some resolution. She ignored every attempt at communication until finally responding with a text message that made Tommy's blood run cold. The text read, "Should have done your research, kid. Not my problem you can't afford a real lawyer. Stop harassing me or I'll file a restraining order." Tommy showed the messages to his parents, and his father, a man who had worked his entire life believing in the basic decency of people, actually had tears in his eyes reading Karen's cruel words. Tommy's mother held him as he cried, feeling stupid and helpless and angry at himself for being so trusting. The car sat broken in their driveway, a $4,500 monument to Tommy's naivety. He couldn't afford the repairs. He couldn't afford another car. He was missing work shifts because he had no reliable transportation. His grades were slipping because he couldn't get to campus consistently. Everything he had worked for over 2 years was gone, stolen by a woman who had smiled to his face while picking his pocket. Tommy spent 2 weeks researching his options and discovered that he could file a small claims case against Karen and the dealership without needing an expensive attorney. He gathered every piece of documentation he had. The original advertisement claiming clean title and certified pre-owned status, the contract with its hidden salvage title clause, the mechanic's detailed inspection report, photographs of the water damage, the title history showing flood damage, and screenshots of Karen's cruel text messages. He filed the case himself, representing himself because he simply couldn't afford legal representation, and requested $4,500 to recover his stolen savings. When the case was assigned to Judge Judy's television courtroom, Tommy felt a mixture of hope and terror. He had watched Judge Judy before and knew she had a reputation for seeing through lies and protecting vulnerable people from scammers. But he also worried that Karen would bring expensive lawyers and somehow twist the situation to make him look like the bad guy. What Tommy didn't know was that Judge Judy's production team had already done extensive background research on Karen Roberts and discovered a pattern of predatory behavior that made this case much bigger than one stolen car. Karen Roberts, on the other hand, was absolutely thrilled when she learned the case would be heard on Judge Judy. She saw it as free publicity for her business and an opportunity to demonstrate her professionalism on national television. At 42 years old, Karen had spent her entire career in car sales, working her way up from entry-level salesperson to finance manager at a luxury dealership. She was good at her job, but good in this context meant she was exceptionally skilled at separating vulnerable people from their money through high-pressure tactics, legal manipulation, and psychological exploitation. Karen had developed a specialty over the years. She targeted young first-time car buyers, particularly college students and recent immigrants who lacked experience with the American car buying process and were more likely to trust authority figures. She knew exactly which customers to push hard and which ones would be too intimidated or too trusting to fight back when they discovered they'd been deceived. Her sales techniques were technically legal because everything was disclosed somewhere in the lengthy contracts, but the disclosures were deliberately hidden in dense legal language and tiny font sizes that no reasonable person would catch during a high-pressure signing session. Over the past 3 years, Karen had faced 11 complaints with the Better Business Bureau from customers claiming deceptive practices, hidden fees, and misrepresented vehicle conditions. 7 customers had filed small claims cases against her, but Karen had developed a system for handling these situations. She would show up with an expensive attorney whose presence alone intimidated self-represented plaintiffs, bury the plaintiff in technical legal arguments about contract law, and present herself as a successful professional businesswoman being unfairly attacked by difficult customers who simply regretted their purchases. This strategy had worked every single time. The cases were either dismissed or settled quietly for small amounts that Karen considered the cost of doing business. She had never actually lost a case or faced any real consequences for her predatory behavior. Her confidence walking into Judge Judy's courtroom was absolute and unshakable. She had spent 3 weeks preparing her defense, printing articles about contract law from various websites, practicing her responses in front of the mirror, and selecting the perfect outfit that would project success and authority. She told her colleagues at the dealership that she was going to educate this television judge about how real business works and maybe even get some positive publicity that would bring in new customers. The pressure was mounting visibly on Karen. Her face was reddening, her hands were clenching, and her breathing was becoming more agitated as Judge Judy dismantled every aspect of her defense. When Judge Judy asked how much commission Karen had personally made on Tommy's sale, Karen snapped that she didn't see how that was relevant. Judge Judy's voice dropped to that dangerously quiet tone that made seasoned attorneys nervous as she repeated the question. Karen reluctantly admitted her commission was about $800. Judge Judy let that number hang in the air before asking if Karen was proud of making $800 by deceiving a 19-year-old college student out of his life savings. Karen's control finally snapped as she raised her voice, insisting she hadn't deceived anyone because he signed the contract. Judge Judy told her firmly to lower her voice in the courtroom, but Karen was spiraling now, barely able to control her rage at being questioned and criticized. Then Judge Judy read aloud the text messages Karen had sent to Tommy after he complained, messages where she called him stupid, told him to stop harassing her, and mocked his inability to afford a lawyer. The audience gasped audibly at the cruelty in those words, but Karen actually defended herself by saying he was being stupid for calling and texting like she owed him something. Judge Judy's response was ice cold. You did owe him something. Honesty. Karen completely lost her composure and shouted that the entire situation was ridiculous. Judge Judy began delivering what should have been the final ruling, explaining that Karen had deliberately targeted a vulnerable young person, used deceptive advertising, buried critical information in fine print, and then mocked him when he complained, making this a textbook case of predatory business behavior that deserved punishment. But before Judge Judy could finish her statement, Karen made the fatal mistake that would destroy her life. She interrupted Judge Judy mid-sentence, her voice rising to a shout as she yelled that calling her predatory was absurd, that she ran a legitimate business, and that just because some kid didn't read what he signed didn't make her the bad guy. The courtroom went completely silent as Judge Judy stood up from her chair, a rare and terrifying gesture that signaled something had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper as she told Karen to never interrupt her in her courtroom. But Karen was too far gone, too consumed by rage and wounded pride to recognize the danger she was in. She actually continued arguing, telling Judge Judy that maybe if she actually understood how car sales work instead of just sitting up there judging people, she would see that Karen had done nothing wrong. The audience erupted in shocked gasps at the sheer audacity of someone lecturing Judge Judy about understanding business and law. Judge Judy's face could have frozen lava as she asked Karen if she wanted to repeat what she just said. That's when Karen completely exploded and screamed the words that would end her career. "You know what? This is bullshit." The profanity echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, and for 3 full seconds nobody moved or breathed. Even Karen's expensive attorney sat frozen with his mouth hanging open in horror at what his client had just done. But Karen wasn't finished with her meltdown. She continued yelling that she was sick of being treated like a criminal because some stupid kid didn't read a contract, that the whole thing was bullshit, and that Judge Judy was being completely unfair. She was pointing at Judge Judy now, her face crimson with rage, completely unhinged and destroying herself on national television. Judge Judy's response came in 8 words that would be replayed 89 million times across every social media platform. "Get out of my courtroom right now, officer." The words were delivered in the coldest, most controlled voice anyone had ever heard, each syllable dropping like a hammer blow that sealed Karen's fate forever. The bailiff immediately stepped forward as reality finally began penetrating Karen's rage-fueled bubble. She looked around frantically, suddenly realizing what she had done, and her voice shifted from anger to panic as she stammered that she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, that she was just upset and could they please start over. Judge Judy didn't even look at her as she instructed the officer to escort this woman out immediately for contempt of court. Karen tried to grab her papers, insisting that Judge Judy hadn't even ruled yet and that this wasn't fair, but Judge Judy cut her off with devastating finality. "I'm ruling right now. Judgment for the plaintiff Mr. Chin in the amount of $4,500 for the vehicle purchase plus $2,500 in punitive damages for fraudulent business practices plus $1,000 for emotional distress. Total $8,000. Karen's legs nearly gave out as she processed that number. $8,000. She screamed that she couldn't afford that it was insane, but Judge Judy's response was merciless. "You should have thought about that before you cursed in my courtroom. And Miss Roberts, I'm forwarding this case to the State Attorney General's office for investigation into your dealership's practices. Get her out of here." The cameras captured every second of Karen's walk of shame as the bailiff escorted her out, her expensive heels stumbling, her makeup running with tears, her voice alternating between sobs and angry protests that this wasn't over and she would be calling her lawyer. The audience sat in stunned silence until the door closed behind her, and then spontaneous applause erupted throughout the courtroom. Judge Judy turned to Tommy with that rare maternal warmth returning to her expression and told him to approach the bench. She explained that he had done nothing wrong, that trusting someone in authority was a sign of his decency not his stupidity, and that the only stupid people were those who exploited others' good faith. Tommy was crying openly now as he thanked her, and Judge Judy told him he was going to be a wonderful nurse someday and to keep that trust in people but maybe get a mechanic inspection next time. The audience laughed and applauded as Tommy smiled through his tears. Judge Judy's final statement was directed at the camera, speaking to millions of viewers at home. She made it crystal clear that respect in a courtroom wasn't optional, that cursing at a judge meant losing all credibility instantly, and that Karen Roberts had shown everyone exactly who she was by targeting vulnerable people and then playing victim when caught. In Judge Judy's courtroom she declared that behavior has consequences, real consequences, and Mr. Chen would get justice while Miss Roberts learned that integrity matters more than profit.